Good morning. This is High Desert AM. I'm Dick Dorwald. Arnold's here today. Nice to have you in the pond today here at Little Frog Productions. Good to see you, Arnold. You may be interested in knowing we're going to have Tony Callicott on the show today. Tony is one of our newest residents in the High Desert. She's taken over the position of Assistant Administrator, I've got to get this right, Assistant Administrator for Marketing and Planning for St. Mary Desert Valley Community Hospital. Neat lady, and I think you're going to enjoy meeting her. We'll also have a self-defense lesson today. Did you show up for that, or did you show up for the great Outhouse epic?
Oh, Dick, you're not really gonna do one of those again, are you?
Well, outhouses, part of Americana. They were a fixture in houses, well, before the advent of running water and indoor plumbing.
Oh, you humans. Oh, hey, Rich, don't you just hate working with humans?
You saying this is not particularly disgusting, anything like that? I mean, it's a fact of life back in the early United States before World War II.
Oh, Dick, that's so disgusting. Are you really gonna do this today?
Really gonna do it. We're gonna talk about Jim Holland's outhouse.
Well,
the Halloween trap.
If you're gonna do that, I'm gonna get out of this house. Whoop.
All right, Arnold. Okay, Tony Callicott today, your karate lesson, and then the great Outhouse epic. We'll get started after this.
Did you have to follow me with the great Outhouse epic? What is this?
Thank God you didn't follow the Outhouse epic.
Thank goodness I wasn't in the outhouse.
You're not even old enough to remember outhouses, are you?
Oh, gosh, I could talk about it. You want me to stay on the show here and talk about my outhouse experience? I'm just teasing you now, don't you?
No, I was thinking about that.
Well, coming from a ranch, I have fond memories of going out to that outhouse, taking the stick, was behind the lye can, and you'd rattle it around in that hole before you'd sit down, just to make sure there's no spiders or bugs or whatever.
Right,
you probably don't want to hear that. But
I don't know. Maybe
listen,
that'd be all right.
Do another piece.
Let's do another piece on the outhouse.
Listen, the story. Oh.
Well, we'll use it right now. We'll use this instead of my piece.
What are you doing?
We're doing a piece on the outhouse.
You're in the
You don't want me to do that.
Sure.
Oh, come on.
Sure.
No, not from St. No.
On we go with High Desert AM and the great Outhouse epic number, I say number 2. They're telling me in the control room it's number 3. I can't remember having done 2 before this, but anyway, that's neither here. This is the kind of thing you have to be in your 50s or 60s or older, I guess, to really recall the outhouse era. Most outhouses were pretty well gone by World War II, except in rural areas. Before that time, like in the 20s, for instance, that's the outhouse, the outdoor privy was just about the only means that one had to take care of his regular bodily functions until the era of indoor plumbing and the flush toilet and all of that. And those of us who were in both eras really appreciate the flush toilet rather than going down the path to the little house out back on a cold winter's night. Here is one of those right here. This outhouse belonged to Jim Holland back in the 20s. And I don't know if you can read this under here. It says the Halloween trap. Well, this particular outhouse every year suffered as one of the casualties. And Jim Holland got a little tired of this. Every year, 4 or 5 teenage boys would rush at his outhouse and knock it over. And it was just a kind of a pain in the neck to put it back up again. And plus the fact, after being tipped over several times, it was made out of, as you can see, it was made out of 2x4s and 2x2s and this kind of thing. It looks a little rickety. And you can imagine that thing tipped over several times would become a little bit rickety, and the nails are coming loose and this sort of thing. So he decided it was going to have to stop. He didn't know quite how to do it. He talked it over with one of his neighbors, and the neighbor said, "Why don't you move it just a little bit? Move it about 6 feet." Well, from this picture you can see the outhouse is not a beautiful thing, but it's not particularly objectionable. You know, it's not a great bit of architecture or anything like that. But the thing that's especially objectionable, I guess is the word, is the pit underneath. That's the part we don't like to think about or talk about. In fact, the pit of an outhouse doesn't come up very often in everyday pleasant conversation. But to move the outhouse, maybe 6 feet off the pit, might be the answer to his problem. He said, "That's a good idea. I'll move that sucker." So the day before Halloween Eve, he moved the outhouse from off the pit, about 6 feet, so the pit was exposed. Well, that night he kind of chuckled to himself, and he had a cup of coffee and a couple of donuts. He was waiting out there in the dark and was getting a little impatient. It got to be about 10:30. Jim Holland sitting there patiently, and then he heard a snap, a crack in the woods behind the outhouse. And here come these young teenagers rushing at the outhouse, like they always did every year, rushing at it headlong. Well, you know what happened. 4 of them fell into the pit with the results you can well imagine. The 5th one, luckily for him, he stumbled over a rock or a stump or something and fell down before he got to the pit. But the other 4 ended up in the pit. Tragic kind of a thing for the kids. And of course, over in the shadows, Jim Holland was chuckling to himself. And well, later that night, you can imagine, the kids went home to their parents. And how would you like to go home to your parents, just having fallen into an outhouse pit? Well, their folks knew where they'd been, what they were up to. Well, there were 4 separate bonfires, for crying out loud. 4 bonfires nearby this little town, burning the kids' clothes. One kid had a $20 pair of shoes, which is a lot of money to pay for a pair of boots back in the 20s. The boots got burnt up too, and of course, revenge was sweet. Now, what's kind of interesting here is it probably took as much or more effort to move the outhouse that 6 feet, and then after Halloween move the thing back again, as it would have just tipped the thing up after the kids tipped it over. But anyway, revenge was sweet for Jim Holland, and there was some talk of the 4 young men of having sweet revenge on Jim, but they figured that they'd had enough to do with him for a lifetime. And so ends another of our Outhouse series from this book, Great Outhouses of Iowa, sent to me by my sister. And every once in a while we'll do one of these when we run out of something better to do. But it's kind of neat talking about the old outhouses, and those of us who are older and who have experienced an outhouse numerous times, I think, appreciate this story.
That story stinks, Dick.
All right. That's